I'm a 22-year-old girl. I was looking on Craigslist to buy a couch for my new apartment a month ago. I found something I thought seemed like a good deal. From the pictures, the couch seemed to be in great shape. The seller wanted to be contacted by email. His email was mexicanpoppy66@hotmail.com. I felt that email was a bit off-putting, but I still didn't have an email in my offer. He responded within 5 minutes and accepted my offer. And asking my address, I honestly felt uncomfortable of his asking. I did not want a stranger coming in my house. I suggested that I just come to his house and pick it up, but he continually insisted that he comes to my house. Eventually, I stopped responding, and a day later, he emailed me again, giving me his address. I didn't know if I should go at that point, but it seemed like a steal almost too good to be true. And according to his address, he didn't live too far. So I got into my van and drove over to the seller's house. I immediately noticed that his house was a bit smaller than all the other houses on the block. When I rang the bell, a middle-aged man wearing a baseball hat answered the door. He gave me a huge smile and invited me in. I was immediately feeling uneasy. He led me to his living room and I saw the couch. Immediately, I saw scuff marks and small tears in the couch. It looked nothing like in the pictures. I commented on this and he just smiled and offered to lower the price. I told him I'm not interested, and here's where things started getting creepy. As I was making my way out of the house, he put his hand on my shoulder and offered to give it to me for free if I was willing to give something to him. I let out a disgusted yes, but got back into my car. I didn't even look out the window. I just drove away from there as fast as I could. But it doesn't end there. That same night, I was laying in my bed watching TV and I thought I heard something stomping up the steps of my porch. I muted the TV and was able to clearly hear the sound of someone messing with my front doorknob. I jumped out of my bed and tiptoed over to the front door. I looked through the keyhole, but whoever it was already gone. Then I thought I could hear the sound of the gate in the backyard open and closing. That was when I grabbed the phone and dialed 911. Soon after I heard the sound of somebody messing with the back door, I yelled to whoever it was that the police were on their way. And after that, I heard the sound of the gate opening and closing again. They were gone. This was a month ago, and nothing's happened to me since, but I still can't sleep at night. I'm on 99% sure it was the man selling the couch. He must have followed me home. There's no way it was just a coincidence. I don't plan on using Craigslist anymore, but I'm still trying to find a new apartment. I was looking for a car to buy for my son for his 18th birthday. I was searching all the car websites. They were all overpriced as expected. Craigslist was the only place to find an actual deal. I found a car in good condition for only $500. This seemed like a steal. The seller lived about 10 miles away, and that's not a bad drive for looking for a car. I gave him a call to set up a time to come check it out. The man sounded normal on the phone. He said that there will be no problems with the car. He introduced himself as Bob. I pulled up the dirt roads of Bob's property. I was about 15 minutes early. It was a tiny little house with a decent sized property, only because it was a bit far from the neighbor's house. The garage was open, so I walked over to see if anybody was inside, but except for an unusual amount of car parts, it was empty. The car was nowhere in sight. The only car in sight was an old pickup truck. I went over to the front door to check the house numbers. It was the right address. The doorbell button was missing, so I knocked on the door. I knocked for exactly 5 minutes before deciding to give the man a call, so I dialed his number and I heard the sound of a phone ringing from inside the house. I was extremely confused at this point. Now I knew I had the right house, but I didn't understand why. If he was at home, then why wasn't he answering? I decided I had to take a peek through one of the windows and see if anybody was inside. Peering through the glass, I couldn't see much because it was pretty dark inside the house. I saw a very old-fashioned dining room set, but across from that, I saw somebody standing at the back door of the house staring outside. I figured that must have been Bob. I knocked on the window, but he didn't even move. There was no gate or anything at the back to the backyard. It was just a wide open yard. I simply walked around the house to the backyard. I didn't understand how he couldn't hear me. When I got to the back door, I made a shocking revelation. The figure standing by at the door was a human being. I went straight back the way I came and went back into my car. I looked out my window one last time before driving off. The blinds that you peeked into had been shut, but I could see off to the blinds that it was bent open. Somebody was at the window watching me. You could probably guess I had to rush myself all the way home. The whole situation has scared me since. All the car parts, and there was no care. The fake plastic human being, the fact that there was no car there, leads me to believe that whoever that man wasn't planning on selling me anything, and that also leads to the disturbing thought that I was very close to becoming a lifeless statue staring out at that man's back door. I was looking to buy the iPhone 5 about a year ago. I found a guy on Craigslist who was selling his for $200. He claimed that it was in good condition and that he wanted to upgrade to the 5C. I didn't know how much it was, but testing a phone and making sure that everything works, so I brought my little brother along, who knew a lot more than I did. We met halfway at a Dunkin' Donuts at like 10 o'clock at night. Two large, intimidating guys stepped out of a black Honda and walked over to us. One of the guys pulled out the phone and showed it to me. It didn't have a scratch on it. My brother took out my SIM card and popped it into his new phone. He did some testing and told me that it works. The guy then asked for $250, even though he originally asked me for $200. I lied and told him I only brought $200, and he seemed a bit unhappy with it. I did have $250, but I didn't want to spend more than his original asking price. I figured it was his way of making sure I didn't hack down the price. I handed the guy $200, and then he and his buddy got back in there and didn't care. We got back into our car, and then we tested the phone by calling my girlfriend. I sat through testing some things around for about 5 minutes. My brother then commented on the fact that the two guys haven't left yet either. I didn't really care. I started the car and pulled out of the parking lot. My brother commenting that the two guys started their car just when I did. I didn't find it too weird. I drove and I eventually stopped at a red light. That's when I noticed the black Honda pulled up right behind me. I found that a bit weird because I was sure they came from the opposite direction. I continued my drive home, but every single turn we made, they followed and close on my tail too. My brother suggested that I pull over, but there was no way I was going to do that. I knew those guys were looking for trouble. It got to the point where I was trying to lose them and started driving dangerously. If they needed something, they would call or at least honk their horn. But they were looking for some kind of trouble. I tried something risky to lose them. At an intersection, the light had just turned red. I drove across the intersection. Before I knew it, the car began and the cars would begin to pass. My brother shouted at me, calling me stupid and crazy, but it worked, and they didn't fall. We got home after the long drive, and my heart was still racing after the intensities of the situation. I was just happy to have a cool new phone for such a low price. Later that night, I was playing on the phone, trying to get something up before going to bed. My parents and brother were already asleep at this point. Just then, I heard the sound of 2 car doors slamming shut outside. I looked out the window and I felt my heart drop. The black Honda was parked across the street. I could assume the 2 guys were already halfway to our front door. I immediately woke up my dad and explained everything as quick as possible. He got up and got his baseball bat and crouched behind the front door. A loud knock came at the door. My dad screamed at them to go away. One of the guys on the other side of the door claimed to have a gun and said that he would shoot the lock off of the door if we didn't open up. My dad told me to call Joe, our friend who was down, who happens to be a police officer. I called Joe and he said he'd be right over. And here's the part that still scares me to this day. There was the sound of a silent shot of a pistol. I peeked over and saw a hole in the door inches away from my dad's head. My dad ran away from the door and we all listened. We heard Joe outside yelling at them to drop their weapons. My dad went outside to help them and then they lowered their guns. Joe arrested the 2. I have to say, this was the scariest day of my life.